sometimes you don't know exactly what's around the corner, but if you do the right thing, work hard, follow your passion, good things will come.
So, Chef Charlie, would you introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Absolutely, Lorette. My name is Charlie Baggs, Chef Charlie Baggs, normally I'm called. I'm the president and executive chef of Charlie Baggs, Inc. Charlie Baggs, Inc., we have 4 divisions. The Charlie Baggs Culinary Innovations is our scientists, our chefs, and our brand management. And then we have the Chicago Chef's Table, which is the event side of our business, pretty much any size of event, either at our space or other places around the world. And then we have our branding is called Brand Love. And I wanted to incorporate love into one of the names of one of our companies. And the third one, we're still creating a name for it, but I've found 3 chefs in the industry that I think are the best. And we're doing a new training platform that's focused on health and nutrition, but really an angle where food is medicine. So we collectively have a very unique set of skill sets and knowledge around this. And we've got neurosurgeons from Northwestern University that want to go through our program. And so we're going to be offering it to people outside the food industry even. There's so many, everybody wants to eat better, and with all the allergies and stuff, food is kind of like medicine. So we're going to bring a lot more knowledge to the market.
I know someone who would love this concept,
Yep.
but that is really cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's our post-pandemic revelation, is that we need to broaden a little bit.
And can't wait to dive into our conversation. There's a lot of things in the research on you that I was like, ooh, this is interesting. Can't wait to talk about that. But before we go there, I would love to hear how you got here, a little bit about your background. And I know you're a fellow Boilermaker.
Yep.
Yay!
Started out at Purdue. That was the first right decision.
Yeah.
Well, I switched from engineering to the restaurant and hotel school.
I can't believe you even thought of engineering. Purdue engineering sounds like utter hell to me.
Civil engineer and building things like bridges seemed really interesting to me.
Yeah.
And it was in a lot of ways. But I realized my real passion was around food. And I decided I wanted to be a chef. My father was thinking I was going to be an engineer.
Yeah.
So it took me a while to tell him exactly what I was thinking. But, I switched my major, and immediately I started the restaurant and hotel career day, which still is in existence. It's a student-run organization. And I was a co-founder of another academic fraternity, Pi Gamma Theta. Yeah. So I just knew I made the right decision, because immediately I was able to take leadership and help start building a community, which is a big part of who I am today.
Totally. And what made you like cooking when you were younger? Like, was there anything that kind of intrigued you?
It sounds simplistic, but it was all about my appetite.
No,
I was hungry all the time. So I would watch my mom, and my brothers would eat cookies, and I would take a bowl of the bolognese sauce with some bread and butter.
Oh, yeah.
I never really ate sweets as a kid, so I was always going for the savory. And
big family? Did you have a large family?
Just 3 brothers, but big. So my mom was a stay-at-home mom, so I got to watch what she was doing. And when I went to college, I just realized that entertaining and hospitality was really a big part of my soul.
Yes.
I really like giving back to other people, and consequently, at Christmas, I really don't like getting gifts. I like to give gifts.
Yeah, I hear you.
It's a strength and a weakness in a sense, but yeah, by cooking for people, I felt like I was giving them something that I had put thought into, and
it's a labor of love, of service.
When you get to cook for someone, you get an hour of their time, and it's a moment of time that you can make as special as you want. And if you really embrace hospitality, you can even make a simple meal with tomato soup and a perfectly done grilled cheese seem great.
So then you switched degrees, and then you got into hospitality, and then what happened after that?
Well, I graduated with a degree in management and a degree in nutrition. And then I worked for 12 years. I started out with Walt Disney World, and that was my internship in school. And that's really where I embraced hospitality. But then after
And
school,
they are the masters. I mean, talk a little bit about
Oh, yeah.
Disney and their. I just was saying that I read on Instagram. It was the when the actors, they're all dressed up like the princesses, and they see a child and they give them a big hug that they're not allowed to let go. Like, I just thought that was. I mean, that's hospitality right there.
well, I got to be Winnie the Pooh.
Winnie the Pooh. Oh, how cute!
They asked
Winnie the
us-
Pooh was one of my favorites.
You know,
Still is.
The Beatles, Elvis Presley, and Winnie the Pooh. Pretty much, those were all my favorites. But
Nice.
it was 102 degrees out, and you're in this outfit.
Bear.
And it was obviously very hot.
Do they have an air conditioner inside of them?
No, there's where it says honey is like a screen. There's a little bit of a breeze that comes in there, but there's a rope that goes between the ears you can pull, and it wiggles the ears, and it was really fun. And then your lead is a person dressed in civilians, and they're looking at you the whole time. And when you nod, they know you're getting hot, and they say, "Come on, Winnie, it's time to go home." But you're not allowed to talk. Then I went to work for Marriott in the hotel division, so I could learn a lot of different aspects of food service. And so I was a sous chef working like 80 hours a week, and I just really loved it. I didn't have much of a social life, but work was my life at that point. So
It's a community in itself, isn't it? I mean, I think when you're in that industry, your friends become the ones you work with, and your family, kind of.
and I always, I've had 26 interns now. And one of the things I try to instill in them is that they all want to be the best, but you can't do it without working hard. And if you think you can work 40 hours a week and become the best, it's going to take you a while. And most people want to advance more quickly. So, I think if you're really passionate about something, it doesn't feel like work so much. You
So
might be a
true.
little bit tired, but you're always learning. And,
And it feeds you, I think it does feed your energy
Yeah.
if you love what you do. So then what happened after that?
Well, from there, I started traveling, and I worked at restaurants all over the country. I've been in management in like 7 different segments of the industry. Even my grandmother went into a nursing home, and I became the chef of the nursing home. And my
Wow.
deal was I had to be able to feed my grandma every day. She was losing weight, so I'd make her like 3 eggs and 3 pieces of bacon and some
is so
crispy hash
sweet.
browns. And
Wow.
I would go sit down with her, and she would tell stories with the other. So that was pretty gratifying. But, Disney was kind of like the fast, a little bit quicker service. And then I've also done a stint in the fine dining world. After 12 years at Purdue University, I decided to go back to culinary school, to the Culinary Institute of America,
Right.
CIA out in Hyde Park, New York.
Which is the school if you're going to go, right? I mean, that is an amazing school.
I had gotten accepted. I took the test to get my master's degree from a very reputable university or go to culinary school. And I asked my fiance at the time, what should I do? She's like, "Charlie, all you've ever dreamed about is being a chef. You have to go to culinary school." So I didn't really need another associate degree, but it really was my passion. So my wife Kathy stayed in Chicago, and I moved to New York. So we got married when I was in school. So about the first year and a half we were married, we didn't live in the same city. So as an entrepreneur, we've always done things the way we feel like we should do them, not necessarily the easiest way. So I stayed there. I just studied really hard. I volunteered to work with every chef that came into town. So I cooked with a lot of really impressive people. And
I was going to say, who did you meet there that like stands out the most to you? Because I know there's a lot of amazing people that float through there.
Everybody from like Paul Bocuse, to Chef Marcel Desailliers that just recently passed away this week, and he had written a book. And I worked with when I was at the CIA, I was an editor in the continuing ed department, and there was 3 places on campus that did editing, and I realized I was going to be a consultant someday. That was my ultimate goal, and I knew I was going to have to write about whatever was on my mind. So I knew I had to get an editing job while I was at school. So there was 3 departments, and every day I would go to them. This is what my father taught me. And they would see me coming. I could hear him saying, "Here Charlie Baggs comes again." Literally like 8 days in a row, 9 days. And one day I went to the continuing ed department, and they're like, "If you can fix this Excel spreadsheet, you've got the job today." Well, that morning I took a class and learned how to manipulate Excel spreadsheets So I'd already known this information for about 2 hours. I fixed it and got the job.
Wow.
So then I worked with all the certified master chefs. If they were doing a project in the Caribbean, I would put together their training materials.
Huh.
So I got to learn a lot from just really great chefs from all over the world. And
That probably is where your love of teaching came too, because it seems like that's one of your passions is passing on your knowledge.
absolutely, and today, I taught at Purdue University in culinary arts for food scientists in the year 2000. So it was one of the first schools. Rutgers, around the same time, created this similar type of class. But I think we were the first culinary arts class for food scientists.
Yeah.
So I taught there for 13 years, and now I teach at the Illinois Institute of Technology.
Does
here in
Purdue still
Chicago.
have that culinary program?
They do. It's a product development course. I think they put a little different twist on it. But so in the year 2000s, when I realized that bringing culinary arts and food science together was really what I was good at.
Yes.
Because even though engineering doesn't necessarily make you a food scientist, but you think in a very process way.
And it's like the right and the left brain, which we've talked about
Yeah.
before, of the creative side versus the science side.
Yeah, and then having a degree in nutrition, I took some biology and a little bit of chemistry. I knew enough. So, like when I've worked with Edlong and some of your amazing developers,
Yeah.
the synergy we have together when I explain to them how I want something to taste, because, my expertise is driving craveability,
Yes.
they would say, okay. And then I would taste, and I was like, I need a little different nuance. I want a brown butter note or whatever it is. And that's where the magic comes in when you work with scientists, because you have different tools on the commercialization side of, of cooking and
Right. I love that because they have to translate it then to a chemical, really, say brown butter, and then it's like,
it's a molecule you're putting.
yeah,
you're-
really a molecule, yeah, down to the, okay, what tastes like that? I love the people say like, it kind of tastes like baby puke. Like we all know what baby puke tastes like. And then it's like, oh, that's lipolytic. And then that gets you to exactly what note and molecule you need. So, it's-
when I teach really all ages, I have a philosophy or a model that I created called the basics, and it stands for balance, acid, sweetness, intended flavor and texture, color, and salt. The reason why I created this, Lorette, was scientists would always say, so what is on your mind, chef? And half the time I was thinking about being on a beach drinking a Heineken. So that's what I would say. And they're like, well, that's not what I'm asking you. I said, well, I've roasted a chicken 1,000 times. I'm not really thinking about this chicken.
Right.
Because my mind wanders, But then I realized that's not what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So that's when I created the basics, because they want to know, how are you balancing the taste, and how are you addressing the flavor to drive
I
craveability?
love that. But I would love you to kind of go back a little bit and say what made you to decide to start your business?
Well, on a Wednesday, my wife got let go from her company because she was pregnant.
What?
Which,
All right, what?
That's
illegal.
That's illegal. And we knew that. So we talked about it on Wednesday night. And Thursday, I was like, I just don't, I'm just going to let the world take care of these people, I think. I don't think we're going to spend our energy on
good idea.
going after these people, because they're not my kind of people. I think we're going to
Karma
move
will get
on.
them.
And we'll just be better than they are.
Yeah.
And so then on Friday, I got let go from my job. So I went from dual income to no income in Lincoln Park
Oh,
with
boy.
a baby named Chase Bags about ready to come on board. And I was a little scared. And that Saturday morning, a client of my previous employer called me up and said, "You're the reason why we were with, this group. Would you be our chef as a consultant?" And that's how the consulting company started. And then a month later, I went to Institute of Food Technologists, IFT, in 1999. And I met the head of innovation for Gerber Baby Foods and Griffith Laboratories.
Yes.
And they both hired me on the spot.
Wow.
So in less than 3 hours, I went back to the hospital. And I said, "Kathy, I just tripled the size of the company."
That is very impressive.
So I was doing pretty decent volume month one.
Was there anybody else doing that? Did you have any competitors at that time?
There was a few competitors, like, some of the very large companies had some certified master chefs kind of on their culinary council. But, And some companies might have had a chef to make them lunch once in a while, but nobody really doing product development. So I really had to sell companies that if they hired me, I could make them better
Yeah.
using technology and science and my experience in culinary.
And we found too, especially back in that era, it's gotten so much better. But at Ed Long, we would call on the multinational companies like the Pepsis and Nestle's and what have you, and they would have chefs. They were starting to get chefs on in their product development, but there was such a disconnect between the chefs and the food scientists. They spoke like literally two different languages, and we could tell that the chefs didn't know how to make something commercially viable. And that was like I think that's the connector that you are.
But I had to convince them, and that's very true. And some chefs did not want to know about the science. Well, I was different than that.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to embrace it. So, if I was working on a butter flavor, I might want to taste 12 butter flavors. So I understand exactly what nuance and what manufacturing process they work best in.
And you have to experience it. They're all different.
They're all different and at different levels. So I'm really big on creating experimental designs, which really was created by all the scientists I've worked with.
True.
So when I taste something, that my chefs know that I want to see a formula weighed out in grams, and I want to see everything in percentages. When I have to look at a formula, if there's a question or we have to manipulate it to drive more craveability, I immediately look for the basics, like how are the fats balanced? How is the bitter balance within the formula? What type of pH are we at? Or where's the acid coming from? Is it from citric acid or citrus, or is it from vinegar?
Lactic, and they all taste different.
Or it could be tomato, it could be, and they're all different. So
And
then I
this-
had to study
yeah.
vinegars and understand how do they affect the palate. So then I learned that I can use more than one vinegar and a citrus together sometimes to meet objectives. But
And it's amazing. I love that. Like I'm thinking back to Laura Enriquez, who we both worked with a ton, but she'll show me, just changing the acid or changing the malt or it's huge. It's these little nuances that absolutely make or break a profile or formula.
and when you see a chef tasting a sauce and then they make an adjustment,
Yeah.
what they're doing is they're balancing the SAS, which is the salt, acid, sweetness. So like today, I will taste the chicken velouté. Chef Bryce knows I'm going to have a spoon. I'm going to taste each sauce. If I think it needs more acid or salt or pepper, we can make that adjustment. Sometimes you need to add something sweet, like a little bit of local honey
Yeah.
or, different types of sugars.
I love when in the flavor world they do these little mystery things, like someone will be looking for a cheddar and then the applications team will add like a little blue, but you can't taste the blue, but it gives it like complexity. And I think chefs are amazing at adding complexity, so it's like you can't duplicate it. It's very special.
So sometimes when I'm teaching, I tell a story about like what color is your rainbow, and I kind of look at flavors as a rainbow, and the rainbow can be as big or as little as you want the flavor to be complex or simplistic.
Right.
If you're doing something that needs to have a nice strawberry flavor, it might be a little simpler. There might be a few nuances you can manipulate, but and with the strawberry, for example, you might be able to manipulate the pH or the sourness and the sweetness, but probably no salt, and it'd be fairly limited. But say we're going to do some type of like a beef stew that's more complex. Well, when you caramelize the onions and the carrots and, the celery and the mirepoix, we call it, and then, you caramelize the meat, you're creating mired browning. And what you're doing is you're creating reaction chemistry, and now you're creating a complex flavor. And each one of these components you probably can't taste individually, but it's the way that they're compounded that
Yes.
creates specific nuances. So that's my area of expertise. Like I know a lot about cooking techniques, how much caramelization do you need? And this is the type of stuff food scientists want to know when they're cooking with a chef, because they can measure all those things. And there's ways that you can add these characteristics without actually browning the meat. There's a lot of functional ingredients. And
Sometimes we talk to customers that have, they're making like crackers and getting that cultured note of a cracker, and that takes days. and that we can cut the days down by adding those cultured notes. Like that stuff's so very fun. So I want to switch gears a little bit. You talk a lot about the hedgehog concept, which I am a huge fan of, and we also at Edlong went through a really, like back in the 90s, it saved our life, going through that hedgehog concept and figuring out what we were the best in the world at and really focusing on dairy or the taste of dairy. So dive into that and a little bit of how you use that in your business and kind of describe it for the listeners.
Well, there's always an impetus why you do things. In 2008, every entrepreneur had a chance to lose money pretty much the minute.
Rough year.
It was a tough year, and it was right before the holiday, and I didn't want to. I had 5 offices at the time, and I didn't want to close the offices because it was going to affect my employees, their livelihood and their families. But so I held on for a while, and eventually I had to centralize the company. So during that time, I said, I have to study. I have to be better than this. I have to figure out how am I going to get through this and what's my point of difference. So I read the book Good to Great. It's one of the many books I read by Jim Collins. And, he interviewed, I think, 2,000 companies. And he really tracked what they did well and what they did that didn't work so well. But one of the things that was consistent by all the successful companies is they were driven by their passion. But the really important one, because like as a chef, every chef's passionate. That's pretty easy to come with. But having the desire to be the best in the world at what you do, that comes from what your grandmother taught you, or maybe your parents. That comes from the way you were raised, and that I can't change. So when I have an interview, in the first minute, I ask, do you want to be the best chef in the world for my company? And if you're answering yes, like emphatically, if you don't do that and there's any hesitation, the interview's over. That's how strongly I believe in this. And people will say, can I try again? I says, no. We might be able to be friends, but you'll never work for my company. I'm sorry.
Right.
So
what is your company's hedgehog? So what are the 3 circles for you?
Yeah, so it's passion, desire to be the best in the world and drive the economic engine.
Maybe we should first define it, though, a little bit more. So let's define it. So we had mentioned earlier, it comes from the book Good to Great from Jim Collins, which is a rather old book, but this concept stands the test of time. I agree. And the concept is there's 3 circles. So there's what you're passionate about, what's your economic driver, and what you can be the best in the world at. And the way Jim Collins describes it, which I think is profound, is it's the intersection of those 3 circles. And you have to always be living in that intersection of the 3, and that's how you make decisions. You could have a project, and I'm sure this happens to you, or a partner, and it's like, do they fit in that intersection? Are they part of what I'm passionate about? Can they be an economic driver for me? I mean, that's a hard one. You got to make money. Can I make money off this partnership? Is it mutually beneficial? That's what we try to put in that economic driver hole. So let's kind of go back into breaking that down a little bit. And I think what you can be the best in the world, I like your thoughts on that. Like, it's not an aspiration, because that gets tricky. Can I be the best in the world? That's not the right way to go after the hedgehog, right?
Right.
You have to own being the best in the world at it now.
Yeah, and be able to maintain it.
Yeah.
And that sometimes takes training or an investment.
So your circle, that circle for you, is being the best chef in the world. Is that right? Or what would you call it?
For me personally, as my company grows, there's things that we do that I'm not personally passionate about, but my team member is, or my leader of that division. But they have to have that desire, and they have to have the skills to be the best at it. So that's part of the initial assessment when you interview someone.
Yeah.
You know what you want to be the best at, making sure you have the right tools.
Okay.
And sometimes you have to build it out. You're not always the best at everything, but you can build it out, and you can become the best.
Yeah. But I think that could be the slippery slope part. So for us, and we've gone through this a couple times, but I think where we landed, and we've always been similar to you. You said you kind of hit this at a hard time in your life. 08, 09 was hard for everybody. We hit this in like the mid 90s, which was a really hard time for Edlong, where we almost went bankrupt. I mean, it was definitely a soul searching time for us. And we came to the conclusion that best in the world, we went back into our roots and said, we are the best in the world at dairy and the taste of dairy, and always have been since my dad's era.
Yeah.
And at that time, we were dabbling in fruit flavors, and we were going down a route that almost killed us.
Yeah.
And so we really had to focus. And then our passion, we determined, and this is still true, is the passion around relationships and like customer driven and really, I think, empathy for the customer and putting ourselves in their shoes and understanding
That's
the
a great
problem.
way to look at it. Yeah.
And I think you're like this too. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's probably is your passion of listening and not assuming that they know the problem or even you know the problem. But if you truly listen, you find that implicit problem, implicit need. And then the economic driver, which I think this one's hard for a lot of people. Because it's like, for some reason, we feel guilty that we have to make money, but we have to make money to keep these businesses afloat and the livelihoods of a lot of people that depend on us afloat. But that one, we came up with like mutually beneficial partnerships, because you can have customers that either drive your price down and it's, and they're not mutually beneficial. It's like, you want all this service and you want all of this creativity. I'm sorry, you have to pay for it. It's,
Absolutely, yeah.
It's got to be a win-win here. So that's our hedgehog. So I think I get a handle on yours is kind of similar in a way. Except
I think it's the way you described it. I think that model is very similar to ours. The other thing about the hedgehog model is, hedgehog's an animal that's very resilient, and when it fears like there's a lion that comes up, it can roll up into a ball, kind of like a porcupine, and the lion can't do anything. And that, to me, resembles a company that's resilient during economic downtimes. And that's what I was trying to do after 2008, is create a company that could sustain economic, downturns.
I love that. And I think with the right hedgehog, you really do, because it helps you make decisions that are sustainable for your business.
My team knows now something I think is really important is being kind. It's a very simple philosophy.
Yeah.
But I don't have time anymore for any type of, head games. It doesn't mean that we might have a conflict or might not agree, but we can work things out. Conflict resolution's what mature people do.
Yeah.
And the more advanced you get in your management techniques, you learn how to address conflict resolution. I don't want my team to agree with me all the time.
No.
I want to be driven by their passion, and I guess in our world, passion has to do with studying and gaining new knowledge and wanting to be the best chef and
Continuing to learn, continuing to be curious. I love that too.
as a CEO, you know that the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. It's pretty humbling as a chef, particularly.
And I think even with that conflict resolution, which we're now kind of way off the hedgehog, but I like where you're going with that, is there can be that false harmony, I think is the word, where you can have a kind culture, but sometimes it's a false harmony. I've been in this place before in the recent past, and it's almost it's like delusional. You want to believe everything's fine, and so you kind of create that, and then you have to sometimes face the reality that that's false harmony.
Even if you have to make a tough decision that affects someone else's life, I think you just have to do it with honesty and
Grace.
be very fact-based.
Yep.
It takes a strong leader to tell someone something that they don't want to hear. But as a company grows, you are going to face times where there's going to be people in certain positions that the company's outgrown them.
Yeah.
Or the company's taken a direction, and it's okay. Sometimes people don't want to change, and that's okay. But they may not fit your model. So,
And they're usually happier, right? I mean, has there ever been a time that you feel like you've had to make that change or let somebody go that you ever felt like, oh, that was the wrong decision? Or would you say 9 times out of 10 or 10 out of 10, it was the right decision?
yeah, I think it's usually the right decision. I usually know. And, my business partner is my wife, and she's a mother, and she has that sixth sense. She tells me.
Yeah.
There's something happening here. You need to, there's a little flag that's gone up. You need to pay attention to what's going on.
Right.
And it usually has to do with people just not having the desire to be their best anymore. Like they've just their passions have changed, or they, maybe their needs in their life have changed. Yep. And, sometimes just being a professional, you have to deliver the bad news to help people grow.
Yeah.
Because you can get really stagnant, and some people like to stay in a certain spot. And, even though it's not what's easiest for me, when I think I have a chef, if I feel like they need more experience, I'll let them know, because I want them to do the best they can do for their family. And if I think they're kind of stuck where they are, I might suggest that you need some additional experience. And especially back in the day when I started the company, every chef wanted to do the easy thing and be Charlie Bags. I'm like, yeah, it's not easy though.
Right.
Because, I study and work probably more than I did when I was in college still, because there's just so much to learn, and the complexities of our clients are so challenging. But a big part of it really is around that hedgehog model, is really driving people back to the core of what it is they're trying to achieve. And, I think the one thing about the hedgehog model is that it really incorporates all your departments, like HR, operations,
It truly
financial, marketing, every department has to be in sync. So to me, that's like the big circle, is all your departments. And then on the as you start to narrow it down, you're getting your HR to focus on the attributes that you need to be the best at what you need. Someone that
a really good way to pull it back to hedgehog. I think that's hugely true. And even when we went through it, so we say, best in dairy, or profiles of dairy, or taste of dairy. And you think that's only the flavors or applications, but it's truly the whole company has to know that, because supply chain has to know that.
Yeah.
It depends on the raw materials that we buy when we made that focus, and the employees that we hire to HR have to be passionate about the customer, So
Absolutely.
it does affect the entire company, even though it sounds like, oh, that's just sales. No,
Yes.
everyone has to be passionate about the relationship with the customer. So I love how you kind of defined that, and how you make it apply to the whole business. So I haven't thought about our hedgehog in a while. And I was reading that and studying up on you, and then I go, well, what's the hedgehog of my podcast?
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think it is? I'm like, I need one. I need to, and then maybe it just hasn't evolved to that yet, but it's getting there. It's a good question though.
I think you're kind of building a new community of leaders, and you're getting them to focus on their legacy. It's a deep question.
How do you describe? Well, you kind of just said it, but the best in the world is to be the best chef.
Or whatever the job is that you're doing. The point here, Lorette, is if you get a job, and as a consultant, it might take you 6 hours, and then, the last part of your day is a little more relaxed, maybe, or you get ready for tomorrow. But if you're training and you're still learning, it might take you 12 hours. And in my mind, that's just part of learning, and that's the sweat equity of becoming the best consultant. You just got to put the work in, and I'm looking for people that are willing to stay after work a little bit if they have to figure something out. One of my current employees, been with me a long time. When he was an intern, he would stay after, and he learned how to blow sugar.
Wow.
And he tried all these things. I says, you can use any ingredients in my kitchen, and you can experiment with anything that you want. If you want a 50-pound bag of flour or whatever you want, I'll bring it in for you to keep
playing around.
And that's a person that wants to be the best in the world.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to tell you have to go do that. I want a person that's self-motivated, because I'm the same way. I want to use my brain to help other people solve problems.
Right.
I want to be working with the clients, and honestly, I want to be cooking as much as I can. As a CEO of a company, a lot of my chef friends at my age don't cook any longer.
Yeah.
Well, that's not who I am. I still cook quite
Yeah, I think
often.
you probably have to stay in touch with that for your customers' best interest, So tell us a story of like one of the most projects or relationships or partnerships that you're proud of that you've accomplished.
So ironically, it's probably when I first start working with your company, Edlong.
You're just saying that.
No, back, when Gerber hired me on Chase's birthday, you can imagine, and it's a baby food company. when you have your first baby, you have no idea what you're doing.
At
really.
all. No.
You don't, there's so many things you don't know how to do. Like, what are you going to feed them? These are all
Right.
questions. Well, now I have access to the top scientists in the world that have done a study on everything. So working with them, immediately they put me in charge of helping write formulations and working with the scientists. And it was a retort process, which is a very abusive, thermal process. So, I went to a retort school at Purdue University.
Yes.
That's when Phil Nelson said, "We've never had a chef in here. I want you to teach a class."
That's
So,
fantastic, yes.
so by following your passion, that's an example that good things will come. Sometimes you don't know exactly what's around the corner, but if you do the right thing, work hard, follow your passion, good things will come.
I agree. And believing in it. So yeah, I remember that project, and it was, how old's Chase? I know you
24-ish.
24-ish. Yep. So I have a 24 too.
Yeah.
So I remember that era of that win that we got together in that project and feeding my child that. It's like you get so I know you do too. Get so excited to see stuff on the retail shelf, or I bet in a restaurant that you've been a part of. It must be.
That is fun, but a lot of projects we work on a certain phase of a project.
Yeah.
And but it is exciting to see something on the shelf that you helped develop.
And that's the part of our industry that is rough. I mean, I love the food industry, but one of the rough parts, and you have to have really thick skin, especially in the area that you're in and Laura's in product development, because something like, 80 to 90% of what you guys work on doesn't ever see the light of day. So you have to really have drive to keep going and not get brought down by that.
We were talking with your team here earlier today. Our goal is always to figure out, what the problem is.
Yeah.
Quite often our clients think they know what the problem is, but they may not realize that there's other problems associated with it.
Right.
And
like even that example of you were wise enough to say, put the flavor in the water. I wouldn't have thought of that. And it was the simplest solution.
yeah, when the raviolis that we worked on, the flavor from the filling was going into the water, the broth. Mm-hmm. So we put the seasoning in the broth, and it kind of cooked into the ravioli.
Brilliant.
So it was a reverse flavor situation, but it was an experiment. But that worked, and seeing I flew all over the world feeding babies. So like I'm over in China, and women are handing me their little babies, and I've got like my 3 prototypes. I'm like, am I allowed to feed these babies? I don't know what their allergies are.
And what do you do?
I'm like, I'm all in.
Just
but,
go for which one they grab? Like, what was
no,
the
like little babies, they put it in their mouth and they don't like it. They're like, they just spit it out. It is brilliant. It's like the best focus group.
Oh, how fun.
'Cause you don't have to worry about them writing anything down. You're going to get immediate. So the way little babies work is, you sense sweetness on the tip of your tongue. So if there's not a certain level of sweetness that comes from carrots or sweet potatoes, things like that, it won't go any further. Because, your body's designed that if there's anything that's bitter,
Right.
that it might be poisonous, and you reject it. So I have a lot of experience feeding little babies. And down in Mexico, they said, Charlie, why don't you develop the gold standard chicken and vegetable? And I said, I can do that, but what I would prefer is to go to 3 different Mexican families' homes at different income levels.
Huh.
And so they said, we can arrange that. So the next day we went to 3 people's homes, and they showed me how they do it. They all pretty much made it the same way. They would take water, and they would put some chayote and some onion and carrot in a broth with chicken. And then they would let that cook. And really, in some of the restaurants I've worked in, that was family meal. We would eat just like this with tortillas. And so they would take that, and then they would puree it. And then they would make that puree with the vegetables and the broth, and that was the baby food. But the secret ingredient is they would use chicken broth, a Norse chicken broth.
Oh, yeah.
To fortify their chicken, and that was the flavor that we would have guessed.
Yeah.
Because that was the signature, that's what they were used to. Mm-hmm. So then that became our new gold standard.
And then you had to translate it into
something that would fit their business model and flavor
so
profiles.
Cool. And I love that. We were talking about even like today when you're going to do some some cooking for us of starting with a gold standard and a very chef recipe, and then the translation is, to me, that is just so cool.
Today we get an opportunity to work with sous chef Chris, your
Yeah,
son.
that's gonna be fun.
So, one of the things I really like to do is help build the culinary community in really every way, bringing scientists and chefs together.
Yeah.
But today it's going to be sous chef, Chris.
Yeah.
So what we're going to teach him today is, one, we'll talk about how to make a chicken veloute. It's basically a chicken broth thickened with flour or a roux. And then we made a non-dairy version using soy milk. There's a higher fat soy milk that kind of replicates like a heavy cream.
Yeah.
So we're using that with an oolong butter flavor.
Oh, this will be fun.
So we're going to have a side-by-side test. So the team will get to taste the difference. And we can explain the differences. And if someone says, boy, I like this, I think it needs a little more salt or this or that, we can always make those adjustments.
I think I've told you this before, but we had a bunch of CIA, Culinary Institute chefs in to Edlong, this was years ago, and did a fun little game and made just a basic butter cookie, one with real like Danish butter, really
Sweet
upscale
cream, yeah.
butter, and then one with a flavor. And we're asked them, to pick which one was the real butter and which was the flavored. And I think they all got it wrong, and we were so excited. We're like, this is what we're talking about, and for chefs to understand that it always doesn't have to be the upscale butter. And you save a ton of money if you can figure out how to translate. And I get in a restaurant, that's one thing or another, but in commercial retail life, you have to do that, or it's not viable,
I like formulas where you still use butter.
Yeah.
Because there's
functionality, there's all of that to consider.
But reduce the amount of butter and add a flavor, and you can optimize your costs per forma this way.
Exactly. And it's so much of your world and our world is educating, right? I mean, my degree at Purdue was nutrition and food science, and a little different than the hospitality, but I did have to do a stint in the John Purdue room, which scared the hell out of me. But it was really fun.
Yeah.
But no, they don't teach you flavors. There was one class that we got to kind of play around. Well, I was, of course, the one bringing flavors in because I grew up in the flavor world, and my project was a low-fat mac and cheese. And I'm like, I need flavor, and I need, mouthfeel and, fat. And they were like, what? But I think that there's something to that these kids come out of really good schools but don't know how to do exactly what you're talking about, don't know how to work with all the different tools in the toolkit.
You have to have a passion for it, and you have to be willing to study. Harold McGee wrote a book called On Food and Cooking, and it pretty much takes all the food science stuff and puts it in layman's terms. So, amylose and amylopectin was the first thing that made me realize that this was really cool, and I want to learn more. But it's two different molecules, and their structures are different. Amylopectin looks like a tree in a way, and amylose is kind of like a rod. So when they cool,
and that's why you can't put, I remember this, that's why you can't put bread in the refrigerator, because it messes with that. Do you remember that? And if you do, then you got to toast it to bring it back.
Yeah, that makes sense. I eat it so
it's
fast it never has to go in the fridge.
Yeah, right. That is, there's a lot of cool things that you do learn in this whole science world. So what do you see as the trends coming down the pike?
I was reading yesterday that particularly the younger age, the Gen Z, they're feeling kind of pressured to eat healthy. If they want to or not, it's just kind of expected to look for things that are healthier. So looking at the ingredients. And so I think there's just going to be a lot more training in the industry to teach people about different ingredients and functionality. And, the new normal is going to be different. We're going to have to use functional ingredients like different gums and hydrocolloids to create different types of mouthfeels, or suspend ingredients, or adjust thickening for gluten-free products when you can't use gluten. You have to use alternative methods to create structure. And nowadays there's so many different nutraceuticals that are available. So, you can take the same thing you've always been eating, but now it has additional health benefits. I think the next big trend is, plant-based is not going away. I think flexitarians will become even a bigger part of our population. I know it's really affected me this way. But I really like to eat just real plants. Like today for lunch, we have some beautiful mushrooms, some oyster mushrooms that we're going to roast
I
off.
saw those. Those were really pretty.
Yeah, and just with olive oil, salt, and pepper, and it smelled so good in here.
And it's plant-based.
Yeah, and it come from the ground probably today or yesterday. So
And as you were talking, I was, thinking that that's what we hear in our industry so much is we have to feed the world, and the world is getting bigger, and how are we going to do it, and sustainably, and then there's the food insecurity stuff. So kind of I think, a little bit on that note is like, what do you think is the responsibility and the legacy that we need to be working on and leaving behind for the next generation?
growing more food locally. Mushrooms are a perfect example. You can buy basically a block that's inoculated with whatever type of mushroom, and if you have to put it in the right atmosphere, growing conditions with light,
They say it's
humidity.
like a miracle food, right? Mushrooms, so there's a ton of benefits in mushrooms, right?
Yeah, and new science is coming out all the time, and plus it tastes great.
It does.
It tastes great. It has awesome texture.
When I
and-
ran into you at the NRA event, that was the CIA, friends and family kind of event, and Christopher and I tasted that mushroom burger. I can't remember the name of the company.
yeah, it's amazing.
It was so good.
So basically, it's like a mushroom duxelle, which a beef Wellington has a mushroom duxelle.
Yeah, that's very cool. I think that's good advice. So we met Freight to Plate, and they were growing hydroponically in freights in like cities like Chicago,
Yeah.
and they were getting used in
perfect.
all the fancy restaurants and what have you. But yeah, that was pretty cool.
When I worked at Disney in 1985, Kodak had an area that they showed hydroponic vegetables growing.
Yeah.
So it's come a long way since then. ADM here locally, where they had a lot of CO2 that they were putting into the environment, so they started growing hydroponic lettuces right off their plant, and they also were growing tilapia. So that was a way for a manufacturer to lessen their footprint a little bit and grow other things.
So I'd love you to talk a little bit to our listeners about like, what does your perfect client look like? And because I know beyond even chefing, you talk about marketing, you do a lot of different things beyond just the chef prototyping. So kind of describe what a perfect customer for you looks like.
A perfect customer for us is one that really is passionate about what they're doing and wants to be the best at what they're doing and committed to that. That's really important to us. And they want to drive a profitable business, and that's what we're solution providers. Ingredient manufacturers are ones that we work really well with, creating applications for their product, helping them maybe get into new markets that they maybe didn't think of. We do have an expertise in like 7 areas of food service, different platforms.
Yeah.
So we can help design products for large consumer bases in a lot of different areas.
I was just thinking, Laura was, reminding me last night when we went to dinner, but how you really elevated our IFT prototype, so Institute of Food Technologists, which is a big show. That's our biggest show in our industry. And we were showing like prototypes that were really blah. And you came to Edlong and really helped us elevate our game. And people would come to the booth and go, wow, like it was chefy stuff with flavors. It was so cool. So
It was probably like 2001, and you were one of our, within our top 6 first clients back in the day. And we were down in New Orleans, and I said, you guys sell powder. We got to get over this.
yeah.
Because it makes things taste great and it's functional. There's a lot of great benefits, but you don't want people to get that. You want to give them a fresh feeling. So we went all over New Orleans to different produce distributors, hand picking vegetables for your booth. And we made this big vegetable montage. And it was beautiful. And when you walked up, it just looked like fresh food, and everybody was coming to your booth because they didn't know what it was. And back then, there weren't a lot of chefs at IFT, so you guys really stood out.
I think that was the one that I missed because I had Gavin that year. And wasn't there like a car, like a Prowler that we had, and people were getting rides? And I don't know if you got a ride in the Prowler, but I was
did.
so bummed I missed that IFT. I was like,
I did. Dave Booth, I think, gave me
Yes.
he was my guy.
Dave was
he
amazing.
would always take care of
He
me.
was so amazing. He was so creative. And there's so many ways to be creative, but that was
The limousine Hummer we had one year.
Yeah, I
That-
remember that one. I think I was there that year. That was. Yeah, we got to bring that
You
stuff
guys
back.
know how to entertain your customers, that's for sure.
But it's
Provide-
back to hospitality and service, right? You know, it's creating an experience and an event that's memorable. It's there's such similarity there. Okay, so I think we're ready for our last question. As you know, so what is the legacy that you would like to leave behind?
Well, I think the legacy I'd want to leave behind have to do with my values. And the first one is, I am a person of faith.
Yes.
It's the most important thing in my life, and it's kind of my guiding principle. The second one, obviously, is family. Not only that, my son's working for our company now, but just I work hard for my family so they can get a proper education in college and make sure they get to travel and, they have a good perspective. They find their passion in life. And then
You're a role model for them too.
and I'm a role model as relates to like integrity and work ethic and honesty and I think also what's super important is to be grateful and to be kind. So those are the things that and they really branch from my faith.
And you're giving back.
Yeah.
Nature is huge. Where like I just was telling you that Christopher was interested in the Culinary Institute. You're like, oh my God, I want to, I'd love him to come cook with me. And like you were so giving and generous of your expertise and your experience, and that's huge.
It's a little challenging for my marketing team because I do a lot of things for a lot of people and my schedule changes sometimes.
Right.
But I will help Christopher be prepared for CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, for sure. That's important to me now. But the third thing really is culinology. Basically what I've developed is a culinology consulting firm, helping companies bring that food science, the classical culinary together. And this last year, I've been blessed with the opportunity to bring in a really strong brand strategist.
Brand strategy, I feel like, is really important for you because I don't think there's anyone out there really doing exactly what you're doing.
It's the new trilogy for us, post the pandemic. It's where I see the biggest opportunity. We work from concept to commercialization with a lot of clients, and some of the really large clients have a lot of brands, so they might need an innovation pipeline created for them. A mid-sized restaurant chain is a perfect client for us. We can handle all of their R&D needs, quality control, setting up systems. We can work with supply chain. So we have a lot of applicable skills for all different types of food businesses. And
I like that your legacy is definitely rooted in your values. That's good advice for all of us. It's like start with your values and then figure out where you want to go from there.
absolutely.
Very good. Well, Charlie, thank you so much. It's been absolutely a pleasure having you on, and I think there's a lot of wisdom you shared there. So
Next time, I hope
Appreciate
we're
it.
cooking together.
yeah, well, we will be soon.
All right. Well, thank you for the
Thank you.
opportunity.
Oh, it's great to have you and love your suit.
All right. Thank you.